The morning sun of Kepler Prime cast long shadows across the massive stone courtyard of the Galactic Military Academy. Cadets from dozens of different worlds walked in small groups, their varied forms creating a colorful parade of alien life. Some walked on two legs like humans, others on four or six. Some had scales that glittered in the sunlight. Others had fur that changed color with their moods. Commander Zektar stood at the window of his office, watching the cadets below. His 6 arms were folded behind his back, a habit he had developed during his 40 years of military service. The Vraxian officer had seen more battles than most beings in the galaxy, and he had learned to read the signs of coming conflict. Today, he sensed, would be one of those days that changed everything. The Academy had been training officers for 300 years. It had seen cadets from 47 different species pass through its halls. Each species brought something unique to the military. The Thrakari were living tanks, their thick shells able to stop most weapons. The Zilani could survive in space without suits, their blue skin protecting them from radiation. The Korath moved faster than most eyes could follow, their reflexes sharp enough to dodge laser fire. But the humans were different. They had joined the Galactic Alliance only 5 years ago, yet they had already earned a reputation that made even veteran officers pause. Some called them heroes, others called them dangerous. All agreed that they were effective. Jake Morrison adjusted his uniform as he walked toward the Academy's main building. The young human officer had grown up on Earth's North American continent, in a place called Texas. His father had been a soldier and his grandfather before him. Military service ran in his family like a river runs downhill, natural and inevitable. Lisa Brooks walked beside him, her stride confident and measured. She had been born in California, raised by parents who taught her that problems existed to be solved, not avoided. Her calm exterior hid a mind that could calculate tactical possibilities faster than most computers. She had graduated top of her class at Earth's Naval Academy before volunteering for the Galactic program. Danny Walsh completed their small group, his easy smile making friends wherever he went. He came from a place called Boston, where people learned early that life was hard, but humor made it bearable. His relaxed manner fooled many into thinking he was not serious about military life. Those people were wrong. The 3 humans had met during their first week at the Academy. They had quickly learned that their alien classmates viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Humans were the newest species in the Galactic Alliance, and their reputation preceded them in ways that were not always comfortable. Inside the Academy, the corridors buzzed with activity. Alien cadets hurried to their classes, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and melodic tones. The humans had learned to recognize some of the languages, though they could not speak them. Their throats were not designed for the complex sounds that many species used. The classroom they entered was large, enough to hold 60 cadets comfortably. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, tactical formations, and historical battle sites. At the front of the room stood a massive holographic projector that could create 3-dimensional images so realistic they seemed solid. Commander Zektar entered the room with the precise movements of a career military officer. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his insignia polished to a mirror shine. He had commanded troops in 7 different conflicts, and his presence filled the room with an authority that needed no words. The cadets took their seats in the arrangement that had become natural over the past months. Species tended to sit with their own kind, not from prejudice but from comfort. The Thrakari sat in the reinforced chairs designed for their heavy builds. The Zilani chose seats near the environmental controls where they could adjust the atmosphere to their liking. The Korath twins always sat together, their rapid communication consisting of clicks and gestures too fast for other species to follow. The humans sat in the middle section, their chairs standard issue since their physical needs were average by galactic standards. They had learned to appreciate being unremarkable in at least one way. Vorthak, the Thrakari cadet, shifted in his seat as the human trio settled nearby. His people were known for their strength and durability, but something about the humans made him uneasy. They looked so fragile with their soft skin and small frames. Yet the stories that circulated about human military actions suggested they were anything but weak. Silanana, the Zilani representative, watched the humans with scientific interest. Her people were natural researchers, always seeking to understand the universe around them. The humans presented a puzzle that her analytical mind found both fascinating and troubling. Their behavior in combat situations defied logical explanation. Yet their results were undeniably effective. The Korath twins, Crix and Crax, communicated in their rapid clicking language as they observed the humans. Their species valued speed and precision above all else, and they had been impressed by human tactical adaptability in the training exercises. But they had also noticed something else, something that made them uncomfortable. The humans seemed to enjoy the more challenging scenarios, the ones that made other species nervous. Commander Zektar activated the room's main display, and the chatter of different languages gradually faded to silence. The holographic projector hummed to life, casting a blue glow across the assembled cadets. "Today we begin an important phase of your training," he announced, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the room. "Understanding your allies is as crucial as understanding your enemies. Each species in our alliance brings unique strengths to our combined military forces." He gestured to the Thrakari section. The Thrakari provide our heavy assault capabilities. Their natural armor and strength make them ideal for frontal attacks and defensive positions. Vorthak straightened with pride. His people had been the backbone of galactic military forces for over a century. "The Zilani serve as our scouts and reconnaissance specialists," Zektar continued. "Their ability to survive in harsh environments and their natural stealth make them invaluable for intelligence gathering." Salanana's skin shimmered with pleasure at the recognition. The Zilani had always prided themselves on their contributions to galactic peace. The Korath function as our rapid response forces. Their speed and reflexes allow them to strike quickly and withdraw before enemy forces can respond effectively. The twins clicked their satisfaction, their movements becoming more animated with pride. "And the humans," Zektar paused, his expression becoming more serious, "serve as our specialists for extreme situations." The room fell silent. The term extreme situations carried weight in military circles. It referred to missions that other species considered too dangerous or impossible to complete. "But before we can understand how to fight together," the commander continued, "we must first understand how each species fights alone. We will be reviewing actual combat footage from each of your homeworlds." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Combat footage was always difficult to watch, but it was considered essential for military education. Seeing how different species approached warfare helped officers understand their allies' capabilities and limitations. "We will begin with the most recent addition to our alliance," Zektar announced. "The humans joined us only 5 years ago. Yet they have been assigned to some of our most critical missions. Understanding their combat doctrine will help you work more effectively with human units." The human cadets exchanged glances. They had known this moment would come, but that did not make it any easier. They were aware that their species had a reputation in the galaxy, and they suspected that reputation was not entirely positive. "The footage we will observe comes from various conflicts in human history," Zektar explained. "Some of it is quite old by galactic standards, but it demonstrates consistent patterns in human warfare that remain relevant today." He activated the holographic display, and the room's lights dimmed automatically. The blue glow from the projector intensified, creating an atmosphere of anticipation mixed with apprehension. "Pay attention to their tactics, their psychology, and their decision-making processes," the commander instructed. "Understanding these elements will help you predict human behavior in combat situations and coordinate your actions accordingly." The alien cadets leaned forward in their seats, their various forms of vision focusing on the display. They had all heard stories about human military actions, but most had assumed the tales were exaggerated. They were about to discover that the truth was far more complex and disturbing than any story. The holographic display flickered, and the first images appeared. Ancient footage, grainy and black and white, showing human soldiers in conditions that looked impossible to survive. The Battle of Stalingrad began to play, and the education of the alien cadets took a turn that none of them had expected. As the footage rolled, showing humans fighting in temperatures that would kill most species in ruins that offered no shelter. With weapons that seemed inadequate for the task, the alien cadets began to understand why their human classmates had looked so uncomfortable. The first images that appeared on the holographic display were strange to the alien cadets. They showed a world covered in white, with buildings that looked like they had been broken by giant hands. The footage was old, black and white, and grainy. But even through the poor quality, the aliens could see something that made them uncomfortable. Humans were moving through the broken buildings. They wore thick clothes that looked heavy and awkward. Their breath made clouds in the cold air. The temperature readings at the bottom of the screen showed numbers that made several alien cadets gasp in surprise. The cold was severe enough to kill most species within hours. "This is the Battle of Stalingrad," Commander Zektar explained, his voice calm and professional. "The human winter of 1942 to 1943. Note the environmental conditions." Vorthak clicked, his mandibles nervously. His people were known for their ability to survive in harsh conditions, but the numbers on the screen were beyond what even the Thrakari considered safe. The humans in the footage were not just surviving in these conditions, they were fighting in them. The footage showed human soldiers moving carefully through the ruins of what had once been a city. They carried weapons that looked simple compared to galactic technology. Their movements were slow and deliberate, but they never stopped. Even when explosions shook the ground around them, even when enemy fire forced them to take cover, they kept moving forward. "Why do they not retreat?" Silanana asked, her voice tight with confusion. The logical response to such conditions would be to withdraw and wait for better weather. "Keep watching," Commander Zektar replied. "The footage will explain." The images on the display shifted to show the inside of a damaged building. Human soldiers had set up a defensive position using broken furniture and chunks of concrete. They had been there for days, according to the timestamp. Their faces were thin from lack of food, their eyes red from exhaustion, but they remained at their posts. One soldier was wounded, his arm bound with cloth that was stained with blood. Another soldier was sharing his food with the injured man, even though it was clear that food was scarce. The wounded soldier tried to refuse, but his comrade insisted. "They are caring for their wounded," Crix observed, his clicking language translated by the room's computer system. "But they are also maintaining combat readiness." "How is this possible?" Jake Morrison shifted in his seat. He recognized the look in the soldier's eyes. It was the same look he had seen in his father's photographs from his own military service. It was the look of people who had decided that some things were worth more than their own comfort or safety. The footage continued, showing the humans fighting building by building, room by room. They used tactics that seemed to change constantly, adapting to each new situation. When their enemies tried to use the cold against them, the humans found ways to use it to their advantage. When their enemies destroyed their shelter, the humans made new shelter from the ruins. "Observe their tactical flexibility," Commander Zektar pointed out. "They modify their approach based on immediate conditions, not predetermined doctrine." But the alien cadets were observing something else entirely. They were watching humans fight in conditions that should have broken their spirit, that should have forced them to surrender or retreat. Instead, the humans seemed to grow more determined. As the conditions worsened, the display shifted to show new footage, this time in color. The quality was better, showing a jungle environment that looked hot and humid. The vegetation was so thick that visibility was limited to a few meters in any direction. The humans in this footage wore different uniforms and carried different weapons, but their behavior was remarkably similar to the winter fighters. "This is footage from the Vietnam conflict," Zektar announced. "Note the environmental challenges." The alien cadets watched as human soldiers moved through jungle terrain that would have challenged most species. The heat and humidity readings were as extreme as the cold had been in the previous footage. The vegetation was so dense that navigation seemed impossible. Yet the humans moved with purpose and coordination. The terrain is unsuitable for conventional warfare, Vorthak observed. Logic dictates the use of orbital bombardment or chemical defoliation. The humans chose a different approach, Zektar replied. Continue watching, the footage showed an ambush. Human soldiers were walking along what appeared to be a path when suddenly the jungle erupted in violence. Enemy fire came from multiple directions, hidden by the thick vegetation. The logical response would have been to retreat, to withdraw from the killing zone and call for support. Instead, the humans did something that made several alien cadets recoil in surprise. They attacked. Not just returned fire, but launched a coordinated assault toward the enemy positions. They moved through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate, using the jungle that had been their enemy as cover for their advance. This is not standard tactical doctrine, Silenana whispered to her seat partner. They are advancing into a superior position and succeeding, Krax clicked in response. How are they succeeding? The humans on the display were indeed succeeding. They had turned the ambush around, using their knowledge of the terrain and their willingness to accept risk to defeat an enemy that should have had every advantage. The footage showed them moving with a confidence that seemed almost supernatural. Lisa Brooks watched the screen with mixed emotions. She had studied these battles in military school, had learned about the tactics and strategies involved. But seeing them through the eyes of her alien classmates, she was beginning to understand how disturbing human warfare must appear to other species. The footage changed again, this time showing more modern warfare. The technology was recognizable to the Galactic Cadets, similar to their own weapons and equipment. But the humans using it were displaying the same behavioral patterns as their predecessors. This is footage from the Gulf War, Commander Zektar announced. Pay attention to the operational tempo. The alien cadets watched as human forces moved across desert terrain at a speed that seemed reckless. Their vehicles kicked up clouds of dust that should have made coordination impossible. The weather conditions were extreme, with temperatures that fluctuated wildly between day and night. Yet the humans maintained their advance, adapting to each new challenge. They are operating in conditions that would ground most species' aircraft, Silena observed, yet their air support continues to function. On the display, human pilots were flying missions in weather that the Galactic Weather Service would have classified as prohibitive for flight operations. Sandstorms that should have forced aircraft to remain grounded were being treated as minor inconveniences. The humans were continuing operations that other species would have postponed indefinitely. Danny Walsh watched his alien classmates' faces as they absorbed what they were seeing. The confusion was evident, but there was something else growing alongside it, a kind of unease that went beyond simple tactical disagreement. They were starting to understand that humans approached warfare from a fundamentally different perspective. The footage shifted to show urban combat. Human soldiers were fighting in a city that had been damaged by previous battles. Buildings were partially destroyed, streets were filled with debris, and the environment was hostile in every way possible. Yet the humans moved through it as if it were merely another training exercise. Note their urban warfare tactics, Sektar instructed. They are adapting their techniques to the specific environment. But the alien cadets were noting something else. The humans were not just adapting to the urban environment, they were using it. They turned destroyed buildings into fortifications, used debris as cover, and found ways to make the hostile environment work for them rather than against them. They are treating the battlefield as a resource, Vorthak said slowly. Not as an obstacle to overcome, but as a tool to be used. Exactly, Jake Morrison replied. Every environment has advantages and disadvantages. The key is to find the advantages and exploit them. The alien cadets turned to look at him, and Jake realized that his explanation had not made them feel better about human warfare. If anything, they looked more disturbed than before. The footage continued. showing example after example of humans fighting in conditions that other species would consider impossible. Desert heat, Arctic cold, jungle humidity, urban destruction, mountain terrain, ocean environments. In every case, the humans found ways to not just survive, but to thrive. This is not normal behavior, Vorthak stated flatly. No species adapts this quickly to hostile environments. We do, Lisa Brooks replied simply. We have to. Earth is not an easy world to live on. The alien cadets stared at her, and she realized that her simple statement had opened a door to a much larger conversation. They were beginning to understand that human warfare was not just about tactics and strategy. It was about the nature of humanity itself. Commander Zektar paused the footage. We will take a brief break before continuing. I suggest you use this time to process what you have observed. As the lights came back up, the alien cadets sat in silence, their various forms of expression showing confusion, concern, and growing unease. They had expected to see different tactics and strategies. When the break ended, the alien cadets returned to their seats with obvious reluctance. The conversations during the break had been subdued, with many of the non-human students exchanging worried glances and speaking in hushed tones. Some had tried to discuss what they had seen with the human cadets, but those conversations had ended quickly when it became clear that the humans saw nothing unusual about the footage. Commander Zektar waited for complete silence before activating the holographic display again. The room darkened and new images began to appear. These were different from the previous footage. The quality was better, the technology more recognizable, but there was something in the atmosphere of these scenes that made the air in the classroom feel heavy. The footage you are about to see represents more recent human conflicts, Zektar announced. These examples were chosen to demonstrate the psychological factors that make human forces effective in extreme situations. The first images showed a small military outpost in mountainous terrain. The buildings were simple, functional structures surrounded by walls and defensive positions. It looked like dozens of other military bases throughout the galaxy, but the situation display in the corner of the hologram showed numbers that made several alien cadets shift nervously in their seats. The humans defending this outpost were outnumbered by more than 40 to 1. Enemy forces surrounded them completely. Supply lines had been cut. Air support was unavailable due to weather conditions. By any logical assessment, the situation was hopeless. This is the Battle of Kamdesh, Commander Zektar explained. Pay attention to the human response to overwhelming odds. The alien cadets watched in growing amazement as the human soldiers continued their normal duties despite the impossible situation. They maintained their equipment, stood their watches, and went about their daily routines as if nothing unusual was happening. When the attack finally came, their response was swift and coordinated, but it was not the coordination that disturbed the alien observers. It was the intensity. The humans fought with a ferocity that seemed to come from somewhere beyond military training or tactical doctrine. They moved between positions under heavy fire, carrying wounded comrades to safety while continuing to engage. The enemy, they should surrender, Silena said quietly. The mathematical probability of survival is essentially 0. Humans do not calculate odds the same way other species do, Jake Morrison replied from his seat. We calculate whether something is possible, not whether it is probable. The footage showed a human soldier whose arm was clearly broken, hanging at an unnatural angle. Instead of seeking medical attention, he was using his good arm to continue directing defensive fire. Another soldier, bleeding from multiple wounds, was refusing evacuation until all of his comrades were accounted for. This is not rational behavior, Vorthak declared, his voice shaking slightly. Injured personnel should be removed from combat immediately. Not when removing them would weaken the defense, Lisa Brooks answered. Sometimes you have to keep fighting until the job is done. The alien cadets stared at her, and several made sounds that indicated distress. The concept of continuing to fight while seriously injured was alien to most galactic species. Their military doctrines emphasized preservation of personnel and equipment over completion of objectives. the footage continued, showing the humans holding their positions throughout the night. They adapted their tactics constantly, responding to each new threat with improvised solutions. When the enemy tried to breach their walls, they created new obstacles from damaged equipment. When ammunition ran low, they made every shot count, with precision that seemed impossible under the circumstances. Note their resource management, Commander Zektar pointed out. They are maximizing efficiency under extreme constraints. But the alien cadets were noting something else entirely. The humans were not just managing their resources efficiently. They were doing it while maintaining a level of aggression that seemed completely inappropriate for a defensive action. They were not just trying to survive until help arrived. They were trying to win. The display shifted to show urban warfare footage from a place called Fallujah. The images were more recent, showing human forces moving through a city that had been turned into a maze of rubble and destroyed buildings. Every street corner could hide an enemy. Every building could contain an ambush. The logical approach would have been to bypass the city entirely or use orbital bombardment to clear it. Instead, the humans chose to fight building by building, room by room. They moved through the urban terrain with a methodical precision that was both impressive and deeply disturbing to their alien observers. Why do they not use more efficient methods? Crix asked, his clicking language betraying agitation. Area denial weapons would clear the city quickly. Because there are civilians. In the city, Danny Walsh explained, we do not use weapons that cannot distinguish between enemies and innocent people, even when it increases your own casualties. Cracks clicked in response. Especially then, Danny replied. The alien cadets absorbed this information with obvious discomfort. The concept of accepting higher casualties to protect non-combatants was not unknown in galactic warfare, but the extent to which humans were willing to do so was unprecedented. The footage showed human soldiers clearing buildings, one room at a time, exposing themselves to enormous risk to ensure that civilians were not harmed. They used precision weapons in situations where other species would have used area effect munitions. They took prisoners when it would have been easier and safer to eliminate threats entirely. They are fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, Silena observed. Yet they are still achieving their objectives. That is what makes them effective, Commander Zektar replied. They can succeed even when operating under constraints that would cripple other forces. The display changed, again showing historical footage that made several alien cadets gasp in recognition. The Battle of Thermopylae, recreated from ancient human records and archaeological evidence. 300 human warriors holding a narrow pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. This is impossible, Vorthak stated flatly. No force can hold against those odds. And yet they did, Jake Morrison replied quietly. For 3 days. The footage showed the human warriors, armed with primitive weapons and wearing simple armor, facing an enemy force that stretched beyond the horizon. The mathematical impossibility of their situation was obvious to everyone in the room. Yet, the humans fought as if victory was not only possible but inevitable. They know they are going to die, Silena whispered. They know the battle cannot be won. Why do they continue fighting? Because winning the battle is not the objective, Lisa Brooks explained. The objective is to delay the enemy long enough for their allies to prepare a defense. They are buying time with their lives. The alien cadets watched in stunned silence as the human warriors fought with a determination that defied rational explanation. They used the terrain to their advantage, channeling the enemy into narrow spaces where superior numbers became a disadvantage. They fought with weapons and tactics that should have been useless against such overwhelming force, but most disturbing to the alien observers was the expression on the human faces. They were not fighting out of desperation or fear. They were fighting with something that looked almost like joy. They had accepted their fate and chosen to meet it on their own terms. This is the most extreme example of human warfare psychology, Commander Zektar announced as the Thermopylae footage ended, but it illustrates principles that appear throughout human military history. The display shifted to show more modern examples. Human special forces trapped behind enemy lines, choosing to attack rather than hide. Pilots flying impossible rescue missions in weather that should have grounded all aircraft. Ground forces advancing through terrain that other species would have declared impassable. They do not fight to survive, Vorthak said slowly, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. They fight to accomplish their mission, regardless of the cost to themselves. That is correct, Commander Zektar confirmed. Human forces prioritize mission success over individual survival. This makes them extremely effective in situations where other species would be forced to withdraw. The footage showed a human medic running through enemy fire to reach a wounded soldier. The logical choice would have been to wait for the firing to stop or call for armored support. Instead, the medic exposed himself to almost certain death to provide aid to his comrade. The wounded soldier is not even human, Silena observed, her voice tight with emotion. He is Zelani. Why would a human risk his life for one of us? Because that is what we do, Danny Welsh replied simply. When someone needs help, we help them. It does not matter what species they are. The alien cadets sat in stunned silence as the implications of this statement sank in. They were beginning to understand that human warfare was not just about tactics and strategy. It was about a fundamental worldview that prioritized the welfare of others over personal safety, the footage continued, showing example after example of humans making choices that defied logical analysis. They fought against impossible odds, protected those who could not protect themselves. The atmosphere in the classroom had become thick with tension. Several alien cadets were showing signs of severe stress. Silenana's skin had begun to pulse with colors that indicated emotional disturbance. The Korath twins were clicking rapidly. In their native language, their movements becoming more agitated with each passing minute. Even Vorthak, whose species was known for their emotional stability, was shifting nervously in his reinforced chair. Commander Zektar seemed unaware of the growing unrest in his classroom. Or perhaps he was choosing to ignore it. He activated the next sequence of footage with the same clinical precision he had shown throughout the lesson. This final segment represents the most extreme examples of human combat behavior, he announced. Pay careful attention to the decision-making processes involved. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a small group of human soldiers in what appeared to be a hopeless situation. The tactical display indicated that they were surrounded by enemy forces numbering in the hundreds. Their communication equipment had been damaged. Their supply lines had been cut. Air support was unavailable due to weather conditions that had grounded all aircraft in the region. By any reasonable military assessment, the situation called for immediate surrender, or an attempt to hide until rescue forces could arrive. The humans had neither the numbers nor the equipment to fight their way out. Logic dictated that they should minimize casualties by seeking terms with their captors. Instead, the 12 human soldiers did something that made every alien cadet in the room recoil in shock. They chose to attack. Jake Morrison watched the footage with mixed emotions. He recognized the look in the soldiers' eyes, had seen it in training exercises and real combat situations. It was the look of people who had made a decision that went beyond normal military thinking. They had chosen to fight not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to accept defeat. The footage showed the humans moving with coordination that seemed impossible given their circumstances. They used the terrain to their advantage, turning obstacles into cover and disadvantages into tactical opportunities. But what truly disturbed the alien observers was not their skill or their coordination. It was the expression on their faces. They were not fighting out of desperation or fear. They were not grimly determined to sell their lives dearly. They looked like they were enjoying themselves. This is not normal combat behavior, Vorthak stated, his voice shaking. They appear to be experiencing pleasure from violence. Not from violence, Lisa Brooks corrected. From the challenge? From proving that impossible situations can be overcome. The alien cadets turned to stare at her, and Lisa realized that her explanation had only made their discomfort worse. The footage continued, showing the human soldiers advancing through terrain that should have been impassable. They moved with a confidence that seemed to come from some source beyond normal military training. When they encountered obstacles, they found ways around them. When they faced overwhelming firepower, they used stealth and misdirection to level the odds. They are not just fighting, Crix observed quietly. They are hunting. The observation sent a chill through the room that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Hunting behavior was well understood among galactic species, but it was supposed to be reserved for obtaining food or defending territory from natural predators. What they were watching was something entirely different. The humans were hunting other intelligent beings, and they were doing it with a skill and apparent satisfaction that suggested they had been designed for this purpose. How do we fight alongside beings who do this? Silanana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we trust species that treats warfare like a sport? Danny Walsh stood up slowly, his usual easy smile replaced by a serious expression that his classmates had rarely seen. Because we do this for you too. The alien cadets looked at him with confusion and growing alarm. Every human unit that gets assigned to galactic forces has the same standing orders, Danny continued. If any of our alien allies are in danger, we respond the same way. With everything we have? That is supposed to be reassuring? Vorthak asked. It should be, Jake Morrison added, also standing. Because it means that no matter how bad the situation gets, no matter how impossible the odds seem, we will not abandon you. We will not retreat. We will not stop fighting until you are safe. The alien cadets considered this statement, but their expressions remained troubled. The idea of having allies who would never abandon them was appealing in theory. In practice, the thought of being protected by beings who seemed to enjoy violence was deeply disturbing. But what happens when humans fight other humans? Krax asked, his clicking language translated by the room's computer system. What happens when you face enemies who understand your tactics? The human cadets exchanged glances, and the alien observers could see that this was a question they had been dreading. Then it gets complicated, Lisa Brooks admitted. Because we understand each other. We know what the other side is capable of, and we know they will not give up either. Commander Zektar activated a new sequence of footage, and the display showed images that made several alien cadets gasp in horror. Human civil wars, conflicts where members of the same species fought each other with the same intensity they brought to external threats. The footage showed the American Civil War, where humans had fought each other for years over political and social issues. The alien cadets watched in growing dismay as they realized that humans fought their own kind with the same determination and tactical skill they used against external enemies. They fight their own species like this? Salanana asked in disbelief. What could possibly justify this level of violence? Ideas, Jake Morrison replied. Freedom, justice, the right to determine our own futures? Protection of people who cannot protect themselves. You fight wars over concepts? Vorthak demanded. Over abstract ideas that have no physical substance? Those ideas have substance to us, Danny Walsh answered. They are worth fighting for. They are worth dying for. The alien cadets stared at the humans, and for the first time, several of them began to understand what they were really dealing with. Humans did not just fight for territory or resources or survival. They fought for principles that existed only in their minds but were more real to them than physical objects. The footage shifted to show more recent human conflicts. The world wars, where entire civilizations had mobilized for combat. The alien cadets watched in stunned silence as they realized the scale of human warfare when their species was truly committed to a cause. This is why Command has been assigning humans to the most dangerous missions, Commander Zektar announced as images of massive battles filled the display. Not because they are expendable, but because they are capable of achieving objectives that other species cannot. The footage showed human forces fighting in every possible environment. In space, where they adapted to zero-gravity combat with remarkable speed. Underwater, where they developed tactics for three-dimensional warfare. In the air, where they pushed their aircraft to performance limits that other species considered unsafe? They do not see impossible missions, Silena observed slowly. They see problems that require creative solutions. Exactly, Lisa Brooks confirmed. Every challenge is just another puzzle to solve. But the alien cadets were beginning to understand that human problem-solving involved a level of risk acceptance that was fundamentally alien to other species. They watched footage of human engineers working on critical infrastructure while under active bombardment. They saw pilots flying rescue missions in weather conditions that had grounded all other aircraft. They observed ground forces advancing through terrain that sensors indicated should have been impassable. Your species appears to have an unusual relationship with danger, Vorthak stated carefully. You do not avoid risk, you embrace it? Risk is just another factor to consider, Jake Morrison replied. Like weather or terrain or enemy capabilities, you analyze it, plan for it, and work around it. The footage continued, showing example after example of humans operating beyond what other species considered safe parameters. They pushed their equipment to breaking points, operated in environmental conditions that should have been lethal, and maintained effectiveness levels that defied mathematical prediction. This is not normal behavior, Crix clicked rapidly. No species should be able to function under these conditions. We function because we have to, Danny Walsh explained. Earth is not a gentle world. We learn to adapt or die. We learned to see every challenge as something that could be overcome. The alien cadets absorbed this information with obvious difficulty. The concept of a world so harsh that it forced a species to develop such extreme survival capabilities was disturbing. It suggested that humans were not just different in their approach to warfare. They were different in their fundamental relationship with existence itself. Commander Zektar paused the display as the footage reached its conclusion. This completes our review of human combat doctrine. Questions? The classroom fell silent. The alien cadets sat in their seats, processing what they had witnessed. Several looked physically ill. Others appeared to be reconsidering their entire understanding of what intelligent species were capable of. The next morning brought an atmosphere of uncertainty that hung over the academy like a heavy cloud. When Jake Morrison, Lisa Brooks, and Danny Walsh arrived at their classroom, they found it nearly empty. Only about half of the alien cadets had shown up for class, and those who had come looked like they had spent the night wrestling with nightmares. Sil end single quotes. Na sat in her usual seat, but her normally shimmering blue skin was dull and colorless. The Korath twins were present, but they sat apart from each other for the first time since arriving at the academy, their usual rapid communication reduced to occasional nervous clicks. Even Vorthak, whose species was known for their emotional stability, looked shaken. The empty seats told their own story. Several cadets had apparently decided that they could not face another day of trying to understand human warfare. The absence of Mordek and 3 other Vraxian cadets was particularly noticeable. As their species rarely abandoned commitments once made, Commander Zektar entered the room with his usual military bearing, but even he seemed affected by the previous day's events. His 6 arms moved with less than their normal precision, and his expression was more thoughtful than stern. Before we begin today's lesson, he announced, I want to address what happened yesterday. He activated the holographic display, but instead of showing combat footage, it displayed charts and statistical analysis. The data showed mission success rates, casualty figures, and tactical assessments from recent galactic military operations. The footage you viewed yesterday was selected specifically to demonstrate the extreme end of human combat behavior, he explained. What you witnessed represents perhaps 1% of human military actions. The vast majority of human operations are resolved through conventional means that would be familiar to any of you. Crix raised his hand tentatively. Commander, if what we saw represents only 1% of human actions, why did you choose to show it to us? Because, Zektar replied, that 1% is what makes the difference between victory and defeat. In the most critical situations, when conventional tactics fail, when standard procedures prove insufficient, When the mission seems impossible by normal standards, that is when human forces demonstrate their true value. He changed the display to show a series of mission reports from recent galactic operations. The data was impressive even by galactic standards. Human units had been assigned to 23 different operations over the past 3 years, ranging from rescue missions to defensive actions to offensive strikes against heavily fortified positions. Human units have completed every assigned mission, Zektar announced. Every single one. Their success rate is 100%. The alien cadets studied the data with growing amazement. A perfect success rate was unprecedented in galactic military history. Even the most elite units from other species typically achieve success rates of 70 to 80% at best. How is this possible? Silanata asked, her voice barely audible. The mathematical probability of such success is essentially zero. Jake Morrison spoke up from his seat. Because we do not calculate probability the same way you do, we calculate possibility. If something is possible, we find a way to make it happen. What you witnessed yesterday, Lisa Brooks added, was humans solving problems that other species would consider unsolvable. We do not see impossible missions. We see challenges that require creative thinking. Commander Zektar nodded approvingly. The footage was disturbing because it showed human forces operating beyond normal parameters. But consider this, in every case, the humans achieved their objectives while protecting their allies and minimizing casualties. Danny Walsh stood up slowly. If I may, Commander, I think there is something else our classmates need to understand. Zektar gestured for him to continue. The reason that footage was so intense, Danny explained, looking around the room at the alien cadets, is because those humans were fighting for something they believed in. We do not fight like that for territory or resources. We fight like that when we are protecting people who cannot protect themselves. He paused, making eye contact with each of the alien cadets. Every single one of you represents something we are willing to fight for. Your species, your cultures, your right to exist in peace. That is what makes us dangerous to our enemies and valuable to our allies. Vorthak, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. You are saying that your species' apparent disregard for logical tactical doctrine is actually a strategic advantage? In certain situations, yes, Lisa replied. When conventional approaches fail, when the odds seem impossible, when everyone else has given up hope, that is when human forces are most effective. Commander Zektar activated a new display showing tactical analysis from various conflicts. Human forces excel in what military theorists call asymmetric warfare. They have an unusual ability to identify weaknesses in superior forces and exploit them in ways that other species do not consider. But why? Sila Nunn asked, her skin beginning to show the first hints of its normal shimmer. What makes humans different from other species? The human cadets exchanged glances. This was the question they had been discussing among themselves since joining the Galactic Alliance. Because we have had to be different, Jake said slowly. Earth is not a peaceful world. We have been fighting for survival since our species first appeared. We have fought the environment, predators, natural disasters, and each other. We have learned to see every challenge as something that can be overcome, even when logic suggests otherwise? Krax asked, speaking for the first time that morning. Especially then, Danny replied. Because logic only tells you what should happen based on past experience. It does not account for determination, creativity, and the willingness to accept risk in order to achieve objectives. The alien cadets considered this explanation, and slowly their expressions began to change. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by something else, curiosity and a growing understanding. You are not psychologically unstable, Vorthak said slowly, his voice gaining strength. You are evolutionarily adapted for problem-solving under extreme stress. We prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable, Lisa said with a slight smile. We just happen to be very good at adapting to situations that involve conflict. Commander Zektar activated another display showing comparative analysis of different species' military capabilities. This is why human units have been assigned to the most challenging missions. Not because they are expendable, but because they possess capabilities that other species lack. The data showed human performance in various categories. Their physical capabilities were average by galactic standards. Their technology was adequate but not exceptional. Their numbers were small compared to other military forces. But their psychological profile showed characteristics that were unique among known species. Your species has an unusual relationship with uncertainty, Zektar observed. Most species seek to minimize unknown variables. Humans seem to thrive in situations where uncertainty is high. Uncertainty means opportunity, Jake explained. When you do not know what is going to happen, that means your enemy does not know either. That gives you a chance to surprise them. The alien cadets were beginning to understand that human military effectiveness was not based on superior technology or overwhelming force. It was based on a fundamental approach to problem solving that was alien to most other species. When you are fighting alongside us, Danny asked, do you fight the same way you fight for your own species? Yes, all three humans answered without hesitation. Then I think, Silena said, her skin now showing its full normal shimmer, that we are very fortunate to have you as allies. The classroom atmosphere had changed completely. The tension that had filled the air since the previous day was beginning to dissipate, replaced by a new understanding between the different species. Morduk, the Vraxian cadet who had requested a transfer, appeared in the doorway. He had clearly been standing outside, listening to the discussion. He entered the room and took his seat without saying anything, but his presence sent a clear message. I have one more question, Crick said, his clicking language showing none of the agitation from the previous day. If we serve in mixed units with humans, will you teach us your methods? We will teach you everything we can, Lisa replied. But some things cannot be taught. They have to be experienced. What kinds of things? Silenana asked. How to see opportunity in disaster, Jake answered. How to find advantages in situations that seem hopeless. How to keep fighting when logic says, you should give up. How to believe that impossible just means difficult. Danny added. Commander Zektar smiled, an expression that was rare for the usually stern instructor. Those are precisely the skills that make human forces so effective. And they are skills that can benefit any military unit fortunate enough to include human personnel. He activated the day's lesson plan on the display. Now, shall we proceed with today's lesson on mixed species tactical coordination? As the lesson began, the atmosphere in the classroom was completely different from the previous day. The alien cadets still watched their human classmates with something approaching awe. But the fear had been replaced by respect and curiosity over the following weeks. The relationships between the species continued to evolve.